Hi, everyone. It's Sid here from Fundamental Research. Our guest today is Setti Coscarella, the CEO of TAAT Global. We had initiated coverage on TAAT back in June. Setti joined TAAT last year. Prior to TAAT, he was a strategist at Philip Morris, the largest tobacco company in the world. TAAT was formed last year and produces hemp cigarettes made to taste, smell, and smoke similar to tobacco. Basically, TAAT produces alternatives to traditional cigarettes. So the agenda for today is I'll kick off the call with a few points on the sector, and Setti will take over from there and introduce us to his company. For listeners, you can either wait till the end to ask questions, or if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to type them in and we'll try to respond to them. Here are some key disclaimers. Please take a moment. Okay, so let's get started. The global tobacco market is currently at $800 billion and is expected to reach or surpass $1 trillion over the next 5 years. Cigarettes dominate the tobacco market, but due to rising awareness of its harmful effects, cigarette sales have been steadily declining over the years as alternative products such as e-cigarettes and vapes are gaining traction. Note the fall in cigarette sales and the corresponding growth in vapes in this chart here. According to the US CDC, the percent of smoking adults in the US has declined from 21% in 2005 to 14% by 2019. Now, tobacco firms have been aggressively moving to cigarette alternatives such as vapes and e-cigarettes. Just last month, Philip Morris said that it'll stop selling cigarettes in the UK within the next decade. Philip Morris also has called on the UK government to ban cigarettes within a decade. Now, these initiatives, these statements clearly show how confident they are that alternatives will take over from traditional cigarettes. The global e-cigarette and vape markets are valued at $15 billion in 2020 and is expected to grow at 28% per year over the next 8 years. This chart here shows the exponential projected growth rate in the US. As with any consumer products, marketing is a huge component of TAAT's business. In June, they got Floyd Mayweather to endorse TAAT in his fight with or his match with Logan Paul. We expect TAAT to continue to pursue such high-profile campaigns going forward to gain both market exposure and obviously to generate higher sales. I'll let Setti talk about his product in detail later, but how we have valued TAAT is we have accounted for TAAT grabbing a small market share of the global tobacco market in the next 10 years. For details of evaluation, please make sure you check out our platform, researchfrc.com. And you can grab a report, our recent initiating report on TAAT, and you can see how we have valued the company. Note that the tobacco market is going to surpass $1 trillion in the next 5 years. So even a small percent of the global market share will result in a big upside for a small micro cap such as TAAT. With that, I would like to welcome Setti, the CEO of TAAT. Setti, you'll be able to share your screen. If you're doing so, please go ahead when you're ready.
Well, thank you very much, Sid. So for the benefit of those who might not be fully aware of the company that we have, TAAT is, as you mentioned, the cigarette alternative. What we've been able to do is create a biomass that is predominantly hemp. Now, what we've been able to do is transform that hemp into something that tastes and smokes like tobacco. Because while there is an active and growing combustible hemp or cannabis market, the real prize is tobacco. And the key to cracking that market is providing consumers with a better alternative that doesn't sacrifice on the experience that they've come to know and enjoy. So the analogy I usually like to use is, for a lot of people, they think, well, if you give them something that's in a cigarette format, then it'll work. Well, it's not true. It's like, let's suppose you want a glass of wine and somebody brings you a pint of beer and shrugs their shoulders and says, well, it's all alcohol, so what does it matter? Well, it matters to the consumer. And I think if you want a successful CPG company, which is really what we are, you have to put the consumer's needs and wants at the forefront of the product that you develop. And that's exactly what we did. So when we initially created this product, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how can we do something that's never been done in terms of making one product taste like another. And we did. Then we conducted a lot of market research to understand from a consumer standpoint, would smokers gravitate to this product? And what we found was startling. Even coming from the tobacco industry, I hadn't seen a potential market acceptance for a new product like I had seen for TAAT. We had almost 75% of smokers that we gave the product to, and we gave it to over 300 of them to use in home for over a week. Almost 75% of them came back and said that they would absolutely buy a product like this. And I thought that was extraordinarily encouraging. So armed with that, we went into full production mode and started manufacturing these cigarettes, and initially launched in Ohio. Now, taking everything in context, with a global pandemic and somewhat limited ability to engage physically with consumers, I think we did extraordinarily well for the first half of the year. And we had gotten into over 300 points of sale in Ohio. We started to see some meaningful reorder rates out of those stores. And then tracking consumers, we started to see that they also enjoyed the product as well. Now, on the back of that, as things start to reopen in the US, we've started to add more and more states. Most recently, we launched in Illinois and Georgia. There was a release we put out earlier this week. Within weeks of landing a distributor in Georgia, we're already in over 70 stores in that state, and we're starting to gain traction in Illinois as well. We've also started participating in a number of trade shows, and from there, we'll have some news in the coming days on the performance. But from my standpoint, it was also very encouraging in terms of the uptick. Now, the reason a product like ours, I think, has the ability to disrupt this market, and the market is massive, is it offers smokers a viable alternative to anything else in the market. So when you take a look at the tobacco industry, and let's take Philip Morris, they want to stop selling cigarettes in the UK over the next 10 years. First of all, I wish them nothing but the best. If they want to stop selling cigarettes, I'd be more than happy to pick up the consumers they leave behind. But the key thing for me is they want to stop selling cigarettes in lieu of a product that still delivers nicotine, which is highly addictive. And this is a fundamental problem and a fundamental flaw in the industry as a whole. They're overly reliant on generating an addiction in order to sell their product. And there isn't another CPG product on earth that requires addiction in order to sell it. Those products will sell perfectly fine because people like it. And for us, we wanted to be able to provide smokers with a viable product they could use that's non-addictive, still satisfying, and that they can choose because they like it. I mean, I always looked at it, if you kind of took the tobacco industry and you overlaid it over the alcohol industry, all of the consumers, if tobacco were alcohol, would be alcoholics. And I think that's absurd, right? Because alcohol does just fine without relying on all of its consumers to be physically addicted to a product. So I said, well, why can't we take the alcohol model and apply it to tobacco, where we can give smokers something to smoke if and when they want to smoke, as opposed to creating an overall need. And I think that when you present that option to smokers, the choice is pretty simple. We've got a product that is cheaper than combustible cigarettes. We have a non-addictive product, and a product that'll satisfy you just as much as a cigarette would. I can't see any reason why a smoker wouldn't at least give it a shot. And even if a fraction of a percent of those smokers decide to make the switch to TAAT, this opportunity is extraordinarily large. To put it in context, a smoker's worth about $1,000 a year. So 100,000 smokers is $100 million a year in revenue. There's 35 million smokers in America. If you capture 100,000 smokers, there's still 35 million smokers in America, which kind of gives you sort of an indication in terms of what you actually need in order to be successful. And to put the size of the market in context, I think when I read it last, the global bottled water market is $250 billion. The global tobacco market is approaching $1 trillion. So tobacco is worth almost 4 times the amount of water. It kind of helps sort of hammer home the point in terms of the size and scale of the opportunity in the market here. So I think as we continue to develop this product, continue adding innovation and building this brand, I think that we are very well positioned to take advantage of this, market and become a real global player in the industry. So I hope that kind of gives you a bit of an overview, but for those that either have some questions or a bit more familiar with the story, I'd be more than happy to answer some. So Sid, I think you said you had some questions, and maybe we can go through some of those.
Thank you so much, Setti. Yes, we can open the call to a Q&A. Listeners, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in. And or if you have any questions you want to ask Setti directly, please click on the raise hand option and I can unmute you. And yes, Setti, we did receive a number of questions prior to the call and during the call. So I'll start with that. And then if you have any other questions in between, I'll just,
Sure thing.
Okay. So can you talk about your pricing versus other cigarettes?
Sure. One of the fundamental things that we want to be able to provide smokers is a cost reduction when it comes to their smoking consumption. So when you think about tobacco use, I can basically bucket it into 3 sorts of things. You can say, you have your cigar smokers, pipe smokers, and cigarette smokers. Cigar smokers tend to be enthusiasts. They'll invest in that product. Pipe smokers similarly tend to be enthusiasts. They'll invest in that category. When it comes to cigarette smokers are not enthusiasts. They're brand loyal. But if you take a look at the recent trends, there is an active down trading happening in the market. So you have people because you have different price tiers across different cigarette brands. Like a pack of Marlboro will sell at a different price point than, say, a pack of Pyramid or a pack of Eagle 20s. So a pack of Marlboro in the US will typically go for about $7 to $8. Say a pack of Eagle 20s or a pack of Pyramids will go for $5, $6. What we wanted to do is try to come in at a price point below almost all of them. And that way we can give smokers that viable branded alternative that can also help save them money. So again, it's all about forming a very compelling value proposition for your consumers. And the way that we're able to do that is that our product, because it does not contain tobacco and does not contain nicotine, is also not regulated in the same way or taxed in the same way as tobacco is. And that allows us to still achieve the same margins a big tobacco company would make on combustible cigarettes while passing those savings on to the consumer, which ideally will help us commercialize faster. Okay.
So does that mean that your margins might be relatively lower than traditional cigarette manufacturers?
No, they would in fact be in line with a lot of the traditional cigarette manufacturers because those companies still have the burden of the regulation and the tax regimes in place to govern the sale of tobacco. We don't. So we can still achieve similar margins and take those savings, pass them on to consumers, and that way the consumers can benefit by being able to still enjoy a product at a fundamentally lower price.
Are there other hemp cigarettes that you're competing with?
There are other hemp cigarettes, but I don't really view them as competition for what it is that we're trying to do. Other hemp cigarettes have the flavor characteristic of cannabis, and therefore they would compete with marijuana or other hemp cigarettes. Our product, while it still uses a base material predominantly made of hemp, we've been able to eliminate that flavor profile and otherwise replace it with that of tobacco. Therefore, I would view my competition to be tobacco companies. And given the choice, combustible hemp is about $150 million a year business currently in the US. Tobacco is upwards of 75 billion US. So if I had to choose between which market I want to play in, I think it's pretty evident which one I'd rather play. And that's why we made the product to compete on the tobacco side, as opposed to a product that would compete on the hemp cigarette side.
What percent of your first-time smokers continue to smoke TAAT? I think what they're asking for is how many people switch, how many people continue?
Well, I think it's still early to sort of give you a definitive number, but what I can tell you is that there are a number of stores that are reordering. Typically, it's similar consumers that go to the same store. Like as a former smoker myself, when I would buy cigarettes, I would normally go to the same, 2 or 3 convenience stores because that's typically where I find myself being. You also have to think about it from the psyche of a smoker. Like I'm not going to drive halfway around town just to go to a convenience store and buy a pack of cigarettes. I'm going to find the store closest to me and go buy the cigarettes there. That's why, the exercise in trying to get ubiquitous distribution is the most important thing for us. You want it available everywhere. And what we're starting to see is for the stores that do carry it, a number of them are starting to reorder, which is great because that means consumers that are coming in to buy TAAT are likely coming in to buy TAAT again. Now, as we start building out a more robust digital infrastructure, that'll give us better real-time information to start tracking and managing our consumers to get a better understanding of, what the stickiness is, what their consumption patterns are, how they're liking TAAT. And it'll also give us great insights in how we can ultimately make the product better, which I think, from a continuous improvement standpoint is a fundamental piece when you're building a CPG company and a product. Even if you take a look at a company like Apple, if you take a look at the iPhone now, it looks a lot different than the first version of the iPhone. And that's all through continuous improvement and listening to your consumers and giving them what they want. It's not really magic at the end of the day. If you want to succeed, listen to your consumers, give them what they want, and you'll be rewarded, you'll be rewarded well.
Makes sense. Any studies done which shows TAAT is safer than traditional cigarettes?
We're looking at engaging in some of those studies. Now, what I can tell you is there are a number of chemicals that are formed when tobacco is burned. And I don't want to get too much into the weeds of science because sometimes it can be a bit boring, but there's 2 chemicals specifically that are problematic. They're called NNN and NNK. And basically they form when something called nitrosamines and nicotine combine through combustion. So that's one of the things that happens when you burn a cigarette and you inhale the smoke. Because tobacco contains nitrosamines, which are naturally occurring on the plant. And it also contains nicotine, which is a natural which also occurs naturally in the plant. Now, for the product that we use, I can tell you that nitrosamines don't exist, and the nicotine definitely doesn't exist. So those 2 caustic chemicals don't have the possibility to form. So while I won't say that smoking TAAT is healthier, I'll caveat that right from the beginning. If you don't smoke, I implore you not to start. And if you do smoke, you should likely quit. But if you can't quit, then you should try TAAT, because I do think that it's a better alternative compared to being addicted to cigarettes. So, from a chemical standpoint, it is something that we'll endeavor to take a look at. But at least to start, I can say that we don't produce those 2 very highly carcinogenic molecules.
So to summarize on that, so obviously you don't advertise TAAT being safer. So the 2 or 3 key selling points for TAAT would be is cost. Are you promoting your products as the cheaper alternative, or is that's not even in the picture, or you're
No, it is. I think it's important to let people know the price of your product, because that's also how other tobacco companies market themselves. So we do, like, in terms of the value proposition we provide, cost is definitely one of them. And the fact that the product is non-addictive yet still satisfying, and that the overall experience and flavor profile will match that of tobacco. And I think those are the 3 of the most important pillars you need to hit if you want a combustible product that has the capacity to compete against the incumbents.
And the main premise is hemp is less addictive, hemp is not addictive.
It's not addictive. The CBD itself is not addictive. There was actually the High Court in Europe recently ruled that CBD is not now considered to be a narcotic in Europe for the express purpose that it's not addictive. So if something's not addictive, then it can't really be a narcotic. And now you're starting to see Supreme Courts rule that that is in fact the case, which is great for us because it just helps bolster the message that we're providing to consumers. Finally, you can switch to something that isn't addictive as opposed to a vape, which actually delivers a higher concentration of nicotine, or some of the other products, which don't tend to have a very sticky uptick. I think we can give smokers a format they're familiar with, a product that tastes just as good, or if not better, and again, non-addictive.
So just like smokers and smoking companies have been around for a long time, one of the key things, as you mentioned earlier, is the fact that their products are addictive. So what's the TAAT's long-term vision in terms of you attracting some smokers, a percentage of heavy smokers to try out TAAT? They try out TAAT, they reduce their smoking, reduce the expenses related to smoking. In the long term, do you expect the smokers to continue with TAAT, or they kind of say after a few months, a few years saying, okay, I've quit smoking?
I think, look, I think that providing smokers that choice is of paramount importance because there's no other tobacco company that's actually giving smokers a viable choice in whether or not they remain addicted to the thing that they're trying to sell. I think when you eliminate that addiction and you give people the actual choice and they have that freedom to choose, then they can decide if they want to smoke, they can smoke. If they don't want to smoke, they cannot smoke. And I think having that freedom will allow the consumers to remain with the product longer because they're not going to have this burden of addiction and the shame of addiction that follows them whenever they're consuming a cigarette. They'll remain in control, no different than alcohol, right? I can have a drink whenever I want. Doesn't mean I don't drink. It means I will have a drink whenever I want to have a drink. And I think that we can do the same thing on the tobacco side by giving smokers that choice back.
Very good. Thank you. How easy is it to replicate your products once your product starts gaining traction? Is it easier for larger manufacturers to just copy your products?
Well, we've developed a pretty robust portfolio of IP around the process that we use, which I think helps overall in terms of protecting against imitators. However, at the end of the day, the real key to success is building a brand that people buy into. I mean, if you take a look at Juul as an example, I mean, Juul wasn't the first vape. It definitely isn't the last vape, but it's the vape that's most recognized and the vape that's most used. It's no different than it is in tobacco. I mean, realistically, there's no IP that's going to protect one cigarette over another. I mean, they're effectively all the same. But the reason people smoke Marlboro is because they've done an extraordinary job of building a brand that resonates with their consumers and makes them feel something and a connection to that brand. And that's where I think the real value comes in. So you can have a better product, and I think that'll take you to a certain point. And then it becomes understanding that you need to build a brand around it, because that is the real defensible moat. When you have a sea of cigarettes, a sea of alternative products, a sea of anything, the reason people choose your product is not because it's fundamentally better. It's because they believe in the brand, and that brand drives value for them. So yes, it's important to have a great product, and I think we do have a great product. But the work that we're doing now is about establishing the brand. You know, at the end of the day, the company is really, you can distill it into three simple things. Can you make a product? And I think we've demonstrated that we can make a product. Can you get it on the shelf? And I think we're in the process of demonstrating that we definitely have the ability to get it on the shelf. And then it's, can you get it off the shelf? And that's what we're going to be showing very shortly, that we do have the wherewithal to build the marketing programs like you saw with Floyd Mayweather to help get the product off the shelf. You do those three things, you're more than successful.
That's a good segue into our next question in terms of is distribution. What are your plans to expand across US? And you also announced plans to expand into Canada and Europe. Maybe a quick update on these markets, Setti, please.
Sure thing. So I think everybody's starting to see now that we're expanding out of Ohio into a number of other states. We're working on some very meaningful distribution deals. We just started participating in trade shows again now that they've come back online. Again, we'll have some news on the results of those trade shows in the coming days, but I can tell you that we are starting to see traction come in throughout multiple states in the US, and I think we'll be in a number of states in very short order. When it comes to Canada, we're working with a company that we did a partnership with called Christina Lake Cannabis. We actually share an officer in common with the company, and we're working with them to work with Health Canada. This product would be governed under the Cannabis Act in Canada, because hemp and cannabis are not distinguishable. So the way the regulations are written in Canada, they're effectively one and the same. So we're working with Health Canada to figure out how we might be able to bring the product in. And once we're able to do that, then we'll start to see it. The distribution channel in Canada, because of the way the product is governed, would be through the cannabis shops. So again, I think that there's opportunity in Canada, and we're working hard to try to figure out how we might be able to bring the product to our sort of fans in Canada, so to speak. Now, when it comes to Europe, we recently signed a distribution deal for the UK and Ireland. Our first shipment, so it's a test shipment that we're sending first. And the reason we're sending a test shipment is because it needs to pass through a number of different warehouses and pass through customs, get levied with the appropriate taxes, which aren't anywhere near what taxes on tobacco would be. So we're just making sure that it can flow through that channel efficiently. That initial shipment is currently en route. Once it lands and it passes through all of the regulatory tape, so to speak, then we'll be able to start fulfilling with much larger orders, and we should have those coming very shortly. Now, on the back of that, we're also taking a look at a number of larger opportunities throughout Europe as well, and we're in active discussions with a number of distributors that could look at servicing multiple countries within the continent. So again, yesterday, I think, was my 1-year anniversary. I think we've come a very long way in a year, and we're definitely at the point now where we're starting to execute on a number of things that we've been telling the market. So hopefully that gives everyone, more than enough confidence to believe that, we do what we say we're going to do.
Okay. Next is about marketing. This is actually a very interesting question. Even I want to know this. How much did you pay Mayweather?
See, I can't really answer that question specifically. So how about probably not as much as you think?
And what's the deal with Mayweather? So is it a one-off thing, or is it ongoing endorsement from him, his team?
Well, it was a one-off for that particular fight. I thought that it was definitely going to have a significant number of eyeballs on it. So, when the opportunity was presented to us, is definitely something that we took seriously, because obviously I thought it was going to expose the brand to a number of potentially new customers, and it did. We saw our Instagram following almost triple overnight, and started getting a lot of inbounds, both from interested consumers, interested wholesalers, bankers, and other marketing properties. So when they saw us sort of partner with Floyd, I think it also helped open us up and put us into a discussion that discussions that likely would have been years away had we not done it, because it helped show the market again that we can play at a very senior level when it comes to a lot of the things that we want to go off and do.
Definitely. I guess, that was probably the best or the most aggressive or the biggest campaign TAAT has done since inception. And obviously marketing is a huge component of your story going forward. Do you allocate, or do you provide guidance to how much you intend to spend on marketing every year?
We haven't provided guidance yet. I think as we start to mature as a revenue generating company, we'll definitely start providing more and more guidance. But at this point, it's still very early, and things are sort of growing at a breakneck pace. So it'd be difficult to kind of project out meaningfully, because things would change so quickly. One of the deals that we did was with PBR, the Professional Bull Riding League. And I thought that that was a tremendous partnership for us as well, because again, it opens us up to a number of consumers. Their audience tends to over-index on smoking, and it allows us to get in front of their fans almost on a weekly basis and put pack in hand and educate those consumers and really show them why this is a viable alternative. And, you know, at the end of the day, I think Marlboro did pretty good with a cowboy. So we decided to sponsor a whole army of them.
Okay. I see one more question. So in terms of your growth, are you expecting a slow and steady ramp up in sales, or are you making a big push for a significant increase in revenue next year? What should investors see? What should they look for? Let's say if TAAT is still in the business 2-3 years from now, when will they know that this product is going to be here in the long term?
Well, look, I mean, if I had to kind of give a high level estimate, I think this is our first year. Well, I think we'll definitely be into the 7 figures in terms of revenue. By year 2, I think we'll cross into the 8 figures. And by year 3, I think we'll be into the 9 figures. So, you know, if I had to kind of estimate based on the run rate, I think we could easily hit those numbers. I'm hopeful we could easily hit those numbers. And again, it's also a function of how big the market is, right? You just take a look at the US, you know, a fractional share of the market, like 0.5%, and you're almost doing $500 million a year. So that's 1 out of 200 smokers. Again, that's not really a lot. So again, the market's so big, it doesn't take very much to hit extraordinary numbers. And I think now we're basically in the ramp up phase. And one of the analogies I like to use is the market itself is like this Mount Everest. I mean, it's literally the Mount Everest of markets, and we're just barely getting to base camp now. So we've got a huge runway ahead of us. And I think we're going to do everything we possibly can to continue to run at the clip we're running.
Any update on your application for the NASDAQ listing?
Yep. So again, like we submitted the application a couple of months ago. We've gone back and forth. So basically just the way that it works is you submit an application, they come back with a number of questions. You answer those questions, they come back with, you know, slightly less questions. You answer those questions, then they come back with slightly less questions. You answer those questions. You know, there's a big due diligence phase that goes through. And I think I'm hopeful we're coming towards the latter half of it. So hopefully we'll have some positive news on that in the next little bit. But again, you got to imagine, you know, the fine folks of the NASDAQ, I think, are understaffed and overworked. So, you know, we're doing our best to move the ball along in that endeavor, and I'm hopeful that it comes out positively.
Okay, Setti, I don't see any more questions. Maybe do you want to wrap it up with a mention of a few upcoming catalysts? And also one thing we didn't talk about is when will you start looking at Asia, China, the huge markets? If you can end with that, that would be great.
Sure thing. So, I mean, for us, again, it's an exercise in trying to get into as many stores as we can. And I think that we're definitely executing on that. We'll have some news on, you know, again, some of the results from those trade shows, which I thought were quite positive. You know, when it comes to Asia, again, like we've been in market since late December. So within the last 7 months, we're already in a number of states in the US. We've already done a deal for the UK. We're beginning the expansion into continental Europe. We'd like to make sure that we can sort of hit our milestones in those markets. And as we're doing that, we're definitely exploring markets in Asia, Central America, the Caribbean, South America. Again, I mean, there's smokers in every corner of the earth. And therefore, our market is every corner of the earth. And we'll do our best to cover it as quickly as we can.
Highly appreciate it. Thank you so much, Setti, and everyone on the call for taking time today. A recording will be uploaded on our YouTube channel shortly. Please ensure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and also sign up to a member of our platform, researchfrc.com. You can access all of our reports on TAAT and obviously, and of course, all the other reports we publish. We publish sector reports, company reports, and of course, you'll be able to see our list of top picks. TAAT is a top pick. We launched coverage on TAAT in June, and shares are up 10% since we launched coverage. Again, thanks again, everyone, for your time, and wish you all the best and stay safe.